Do you guys remember Marco Rubio? Lil Marco? He was another great embarrassment to this country's political class. People actually thought that he was some type. I mean, the first brand of Marco Rubio was that he was the answer to Barack Obama. And what was incredible, and I've said this so many times of like, one can and should be, if you have left politics, be a profound and relentless critic of President Obama's record on Wall Street, on the economy, on national security, on aspects of healthcare, on labor, on the environment, and so on, right? But the notion that it wasn't just that he had a certain charisma. He was an incredibly smart guy who took a very strategic approach to his own career, and I wish more so for all of the Democratic Party. But much of the national press and all these Republicans, their delusion and disrespect of Barack Obama was so profound that they were just like, he's youngish, he's young, he's in his 40s, and he plays basketball, he seems kind of fit, he has a non-Anglo name. That's our Barack Obama. In a way that was just totally delusional and disrespectful to Obama. And then, of course, Marco Rubio ran for president. It was a disaster. He was humiliated by Donald Trump. He had a few moments where even Marco Rubio, who I have absolutely no respect for, I think he's not bright. I think he is purely the pawn of the arms industry and far-right interests in Florida. There's not a single issue in which he's distinguished himself on. But there were one or two moments with Trump where it actually seemed like even this total dull careerist registered that you could not have a dangerous, bigoted, narcissistic authoritarian as president. But, of course, he endorsed Trump and kowtowed to Trump. So even that one or two moments where I actually genuinely thought he had some human recognition that Trump was unacceptable is gone. And now here he is as just another far-right war-promoting backbencher. He tweeted out that photo of Gaddafi a couple weeks ago, which is, I think, actually helpful in our resistance to regime change in Venezuela. And he needs to find a way to get back into relevance. And so since an important and dynamic and conscience-driven politician like Bernie Sanders is talking about democratic socialism, and I don't know, maybe there's some 90-something like Bolita entrepreneurs who still remember the Bay of Pigs. Here is Marco Rubio talking about democratic socialism.
Democratic socialism is quickly becoming a trendy phrase in American politics. But why has it become so popular among some? Because it allows the radical left to ignore the incredibly destructive history of socialism. And the promises are very familiar: a universal basic income, free college, government-run health care, a guaranteed government job for everyone. There's just one problem. Democratic socialism is incompatible with our American values. Democratic socialism hasn't worked anywhere in the world, and in fact, there are people living in America today who came here because democratic socialism destroyed the economies of their countries. There's no doubt that our public policies must change to better reflect our values of dignified work, and strong families, and thriving communities. But democratic socialism, that will never be the answer.
Okay, and of course, just in the last point, Marco Rubio has obviously voted for every single rich and corporate tax giveaway. He's voted to cut protections for consumers. He's voted to destroy health care for tens of millions of people. I mean, we know what his policy set is, right? We know that obviously the idea that there's any policy set that would even remotely benefit anybody who isn't an oligarch is a lie and ridiculous on its face. But the two sort of actual substantive answers to that, if that could even summon any substance, are first and easiest, which is, wait, you're talking about people fleeing higher living standards and higher life expectancy and better life outcomes from Sweden, Norway, and Denmark to come to the United States to not have health care, pay for college, and deal with extreme wealth inequality. And when it comes to countries in the developing world, and particularly countries that people like Marco Rubio want the United States militarily and CIA involved in and potentially assassinating people and destabilizing governments, well, it's pretty useful to remind yourself that actually most of these governments, going even back to the Michael Manley government in 1970s Jamaica, were really focused on, in fact, implementing some form of the same successes that the New Deal did here and countries in Europe were able to achieve for themselves. And the reasons that they weren't able to do it was because countries like the United States relied on them to have cheap labor and have their resources exploited in a supply chain that didn't work for them at all. So I doubt Marco Rubio or anybody who took that video at all seriously would understand any of that, but those are some actual talking points that you can use to have a real historical conversation about these things. Now, here's some footage of Marco Rubio hitting a kid with a football.
This is just to visualize his attempts to talk to the kids.
Okay. Jesus.
Game of catch with Republican presidential
Being
candidate
that
Marco
kid.
Rubio did
Oh.
not go so well for one little boy in Iowa.
What's this Rubio clip here? Is this a classic? Okay.
This is from February 2016.
Oh, this was so fun.
We are taking our message to families that are struggling to raise their children in the 21st century, because as you saw, Jeanette and I are raising our 4 children in the 21st century. And we know how hard it's become to instill our values in our kids instead of the values that try to ram down our throats. In the 21st century, it's become harder than ever to instill in your children the values they teach in our homes and in our church instead of the values that they try to ram down our throats in the movies, in music, in popular.
Why is he repeating himself?
Says,
like a weirdo?
Marco, why do you keep saying the same thing? Do you need a drink of water? Are you lightheaded?
When I was working with Fusion on the 2016 campaign, we did the RNC debate in South Carolina, and I remember I knew Trump really had a chance when there were like 4 college Republicans with Marco Rubio signs outside, and then a bunch of people just surrounding them with Trump stuff, like shouting them down. And I was like, oh, Marco's got no chance here.
Little Marco has no chance.
Let's just face it, guys. It's not going to happen for him.
Yeah. Look, it's a
Not
tough.
now, not ever.
Look, it's a tough ride. Or he said, I've never seen a young guy so thirsty.